Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On today's program, our guest is going to be Michael Spath. He is the host of Inside The Huddle on WTKA Radio in Ann Arbor. We'll talk spring football and more, but first a few of my thoughts to get us started. Four-quarter live contact spring games seem to be a thing of the past, for most teams that is. I think we're getting used to the spring scrimmage concept, which is what we've seen instead of a real game around here for a long time now. It was a beautiful evening for the scrimmage Saturday, with around 15,000 fans in attendance. We were hoping to see some of the newly installed offense, and I think we really did. Other than that, though, it was a few hours of drills and some very competitive scrimmage action, but it was just good to have football back, if for only one evening. My guest today would still like to see a real game. He thinks the fans deserve it, but he still enjoyed what we got on Saturday night in the Big House. Michael Spath, host of Inside the Huddle on WTKA Ann Arbor, joins me next here on the Michigan Man in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Here with us on our game day segment this week is the host of Inside the Huddle on WTKA Ann Arbor, Michael Spath. Michael, great to have you back once again.
Thanks for having me. It's been a little bit of a minute here since I think we did this the last time. So I really appreciate it. You guys have always had a great podcast, and I think people really appreciate it. You're on the forefront of podcasting, and so it's one of the very well established and very well done one.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate the kind words. And it's, again, wonderful to have you back. And you, as our listeners know, you do such a great job Inside the Huddle on WTKA. How many years has the show been on now?
This will be our fourth football season.
Well, very good. So I know our listeners are very familiar with you, and I would like to get your take on what's going on with Michigan football, which, of course, was in the forefront again over the weekend, really the last couple of weeks. We had the spring scrimmage on Saturday. A lot of our Michigan fans and listeners were very anxious to see some of the new Josh Gaddis offense, and I'm sure we didn't see a lot, but did you like what you saw?
You know, I really did, and I was really impressed because I went into the spring, open practice, controlled scrimmage, really not expecting to see very much at all. And early on, if you were watching, Mike, if you were there, the first few minutes, they ran a couple in their scrimmage. They ran a couple plays, and they didn't tackle. And I kind of rolled my eyes, and I was sitting next to some guys in the press box, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? You've got 15,000 people here, and you're going to do two-hand touch to consider tackles." And then that lasted about 5 minutes, and after that, they really got going. They tackled. They didn't. Obviously, the quarterbacks were not live, but everything else was, and they showcased more of the offense than I was expecting to see. I mean, the thing that was probably the most promising is that they used the middle of the field, and they threw crossing routes to Ronnie Bell and Mike Sanderstill and Tariq Black. They got those guys involved in situations where they can use their speed and athleticism in one-on-one matchups, and that's something that Michigan does not do or has not done a great job of in the past. And you look at Nico Collins and you look at Donovan Peoples-Jones, and you've got these two borderline first-round draft picks in the future here. And how many times did Michigan really use them across the middle of the field where they held that? That's the hardest part to cover because you, even though you have some help, you're trailing. You don't have the sideline as your friend, and Michigan is largely ignored between the hash marks. And on Saturday, they most certainly did not. It led to a couple of their touchdowns, led to most of their big plays. Shea Patterson looked comfortable throwing across the middle. So all really good things, and it certainly should be exciting for Michigan fans if that was even a sliver of what we can see out of Josh Gaddis' offense.
No, I agree. I liked what we saw. I think we saw more than I had anticipated. And if we learned anything this spring, it's that the players really like the changes. They like what Josh Gaddis has installed. And it's great to hear they're very, very positive about this offense.
There are things that came out, former players. I think Wilton Spath was the best example of it a couple of weeks back, talking at a Michigan Pro Day. And, he kind of said he's really excited to see Michigan take the handcuffs off of Shea Patterson. And it's a term that, to have a former player validate what a lot of the fans and the media have been saying, that Michigan has been its own worst enemy when it comes to its offensive performance, that the coaches have held these guys back. And here's a former quarterback who knows this all too well, that there's other opportunities in the game. And so, for him to say that, and then you started hearing more and more guys talk about, this is the type of football that maybe they grew up with in their high school. Maybe there's a type of football that they watched. They watch Oklahoma, and they watch Alabama, and they watch Clemson, and they watch all these other teams play. Penn State, and for Shea Patterson, this is the type of offense that he flourished in a limited capacity at Ole Miss. He came to Michigan, and they incorporated some of what he did well. They used the read option a little bit last year, but they really made him, a passer that threw to the sidelines, and that's not one of his strengths. And so, no, I think there's a lot of optimism from the current players and certainly from the current coaches. And on Saturday, the fans finally got a chance to see what everybody was talking about and reason to be optimistic for these next couple of months.
In the pregame on the radio side, Jim Brandstatter asked Jim if Josh Gaddis really had the keys to the offense, and Jim laughed and he said, yeah, he does. And I think some of the fans are still saying, well, we'll wait and see this fall how it really rolls out. But this is such a huge shift in philosophy and practice for Jim Harbaugh that it really is still, to me, is amazing he did this.
Yeah, and I've heard that he's a little tired of the question, will Josh Gaddis have the full capacity? And yet, anybody that's followed this program these last 4 years can understand why that question gets asked over and over again. Because Jim has had other offensive coordinators, Jed Fish, Tim Drevno, Pep Hamilton, a little bit of Ed Warner, and it's seemingly, even if those guys have brought other ideas, it's always been Jim Harbaugh's offense. And so I don't think I don't think it's an unfair question to continue to ask. And you're right, until we see it to believe it type of thing in a fourth quarter of, on the road at Wisconsin, and the offense is scuffling a little bit, I guess we'll see. But in terms of your question, it's a gigantic departure. This is a little bit of when he had Colin Kaepernick and he did some different things, but he was still always based, even the San Francisco glory days, on a power running game. Stanford was a power running game with play action that Andrew Luck perfected. He has run the same type of offense, the same type of philosophy his entire career. And for him to essentially say, well, we've got to keep up with the Joneses a little bit here. We need to run more spread. We need to be, no huddle. We need to be looking over the sideline. We need to be doing all these different things. This is as big of a 180 of what Jim Harbaugh philosophy is as I could picture. I really don't know what else would be a bigger change. Maybe if he decided to, get rid of the winged helmet. It's how big of a deal this is for Jim Harbaugh right now.
A lot of people think he's very inflexible, but to me this shows he's willing to do whatever it takes and take the pieces he has and maybe put together an offense that better fits those folks like Shea Patterson. Again, we just saw a snippet on Saturday of what we're going to see in the fall, but he looked very much at home in that offense, didn't he?
I thought so. I've heard a couple people talk about, is there a quarterback controversy brewing? I think that's just to make for clicks. I've heard some people say, well, Joe Milton looked better in the offense, which I didn't agree with at all. I thought he looked really comfortable. There were a couple times where I think he took maybe 2 or 3 sacks. At least on one of the occasions, I'm confident he would have gotten away from it. Mm-hmm. He threw the ball. With with authority. He had a couple of overthrows, but not to the extent where you're going, God, he doesn't understand this offense. He's just not on the same page with these wide receivers. So I thought he looked good. I thought he looked like an incumbent starter is supposed to look. And then it's all about the other guys chasing after him. And do they step up their game and star? I mean, it's a little bit, you want to compare it to any sport, but hey, let's take golf since golf is in the news right now. And there's a guy that can play, if you play par golf, if you were Francisco Molinardi and you played par golf the entire Masters, you would have been in a really good spot, and then you would try to let everybody else chase after you, and they're the ones that have to do the aggressive and daring things. And I thought we kind of saw that a little bit on Saturday. Shea just playing a really solid game, and kind of everybody else chasing after him. And seeing what they could do, and I liked what I saw of Dylan McCaffrey. I really liked what I saw. Of Dylan McCaffrey. I liked what I saw of Joe Milton, but this is still Patterson's job.
I think we're in such great shape though in the quarterback room with McCaffrey and Milton. I guess the one question I still have after spring is, Brandon Peters is still on the team for now. I think he possibly is graduating in May. Do you see him sticking around, Michael?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I don't think he is supposed to graduate, whether it's this May, or shortly thereafter. He has enough credits, and I don't anticipate there being a spot for him next season. And some of the rumors are Purdue, Indiana, going back to the area where he's from, Ball State. He's from Indiana. Going somewhere like that, and wish the kid the best of luck. I mean, for a short little, spell, he looked like he could be the guy for Michigan. It just was too big of a stage probably for him. Other guys arrived and they were ready to seize it. But certainly, the kid did his best to help Michigan in a gap period. And if he had a better supporting cast, who knows what ends up happening. But wish the kid well, and certainly I don't expect to see him on the roster next fall.
The running back position, Michael, we know all spring we've been very short-staffed. I think on Saturday there were 2 scholarship running backs that we saw play and some walk-ons. Did you see anything you like from the running back position Saturday? It
was hard to gauge. That was probably the one position that you couldn't get a great read on because they, even though they were tackling, they weren't. It was kind of like once they got into the hole, if there was a lot of bodies around, they kind of blew the whistle dead. As you mentioned, there were only 2 running backs we really saw, True Wilson and Ben Van Sumeren. I thought Ben Van Sumeren looked like a more natural ball carrier than I was expecting. And here's a guy who, last year was at 245 pounds, and I've seen his film, and, when you watch him, it's not quite Mike Allstott, but you're watching a guy and you're going, okay, I mean, he's going to be someone you can throw in there for 3 to 4 carries. He reminded me a little bit of Siona Huma, who I thought should have gotten the ball a little bit more back in 2015, but someone that was a straight line and physical with lower to shoulder type of guy. That's what I saw in film from Ben Van Sumeren. Well, on Saturday, we saw him have some pretty good vision, read the hole really well, read the cutback lanes, get upfield. I think if Michigan finds themselves in a position where they're banged up, he's a really good option. And honestly, with Christian Turner and Zach Charbonnet out most of this spring, I think Ben Van Sumeren, if I was going in the fall right now, I would definitely put him number 2 on the depth chart, even with those guys coming back, because I think he really has showcased that he could be someone they count on. I don't know if he's a number 1 back, but he certainly looks like he could be a number 2 back.
Any surprises to you? Any of these young players that you came away and said, hey, we've got maybe a little more here than I thought?
Well, the one that everybody's talking about is the freshman wide receiver Mike Sandersville, the early enrollee. And I'm honestly, you have listened to me enough, Mike. You know I'm really hesitant when people talk about freshmen coming in and making an impact.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talk when Michigan got Daxton Hill that, you can just pencil him in as the starter next year. And I kind of rolled my eyes at that. I mean, I look at, Jamerick Woods was back there on Saturday, and Brad Hawkins looked pretty good on Saturday. And I would honestly bet that Daxton Hill, I would bet more likely that he doesn't start a game than he starts like 4 games this year. And so I'm really hesitant when even Zach Charbonnet, this idea that he's the starting running back because he enrolled early and he's a great prop. I don't buy that. But the Mike Sainristil stuff is what we heard over and over again from Harbaugh, from Gaddis, from players, and we got to look at it at the spring scrimmage. And I'll say this is they used him a lot. They used him in a way that reminded me a little bit of J.U. Chesson in 2015. He got jet sweeps. They threw him to the ball across the middle. They threw the ball downfield. It seems like he's pretty active. Like they know that they have a weapon here, and they're going to put him in a position to be successful. As I think maybe Doug Karsh said this on the radio broadcast, that he has not remembered a freshman with this much hype since Steve Breston. And if that's the case, I mean, Steve Breston, as a redshirt freshman in 2003, was someone that, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but had about 40 catches, return punts, return kicks, ran the ball probably 30 or 40 times during the season, and was really a do everything type of player for Michigan. And so I see it a little bit. I don't want to put crazy expectations on this young man, but certainly it appears that he might be the real deal.
Well, Don Brown's defense, as we know, Michael, has to replace some key pieces, some very key pieces, and we didn't see much on Saturday, I don't think, from the defense. But for certain, Don Brown does not seem worried in the least, does he?
No, he does not. And when I watched the game on Saturday, the defensive line, the starting four, I thought Aiden Hutchinson and Kwity Paye, Donovan Jeter, and Carlo Kemp looked pretty good. I thought the linebackers, I'm still not a huge fan of Devin Gill, but he's a senior. He's going to lend some experience there. I thought Khaleke Hudson looked good. I thought Cam McGrone and Jordan Anthony were competing at one of those inside linebacker spots. I thought they both looked really good. The depth at that linebacker spot, after you lose Devin Bush, you're kind of thinking, you lose one of your all-time, greats at that spot. But we didn't see Josh Ross, who was banged up. And so, but between Josh Ross, between Devin Gill, between Cam McGrone, between Jordan Anthony, that's a really solid 4 players competing at the inside linebacker spot. And so I feel pretty good about that. The secondary had a hard time on Saturday, but I think part of that is, they're not running at 100%. They're probably, Josh Metellus a couple different times would let up when when there was a play in front of them. And so I don't think they were running at 100 miles per hour. And when you're in the secondary and you're not being as physical and you're not hitting guys, that allows for guys to get behind you, which we saw a couple of times. But the one position group that has been consistently strong for Michigan year after year after year, and you look at the great cornerbacks they've had, is in the secondary. And Daxton Hill arriving, and Lavert Hill was out with an injury, so they'll get him back. So I feel pretty good about the defense, and I feel actually pretty good about the linebacker and the secondary depth. Still don't know about the defensive line depth. That's about probably my only area of concern. But no, I think they're going to be a solid unit to probably be top 30 in college football. They probably won't be the top 5 that they've been the last couple of years. But that should be countered with an offense that should be a top 30 offense this year.
The last few years of these spring games, Michael, they have really changed, really in the last 10 years or so. And not just for us, but really across the country in college football. I think the days of a full contact 4-quarter scrimmage or game, they really seem to be a thing of the past now, don't they?
I think so. I didn't see all the spring games on Saturday. I know there are quite a few of them. Notre Dame played, and Ohio State, and Nebraska. And, I don't know. I really think it depends on where you are. I think there's some people that treat it with the revelry of a kind of like a 13th game in a season or a 8th home game in a season and really build up to be something. I think there's some places that don't. Michigan has traditionally not treated it like a full-on game. Jim Harbaugh hasn't treated it like a full-on game. Brady Hoke didn't. Rich Rodriguez didn't. I honestly think that they should. I think that at this point in the year, when you're 3.5 months removed from the last season. You've got 4 months to go until the next season. You've got a fan base that, wants to be excited, that you're trying to build some momentum. I think they should treat it as a full-on game, especially since the fact that here's the one thing, because I hear people say this all the time, well, they don't want to risk injuries, or why would they, if they've got guys hurt, it's silly to do it for a meaningless. But they scrimmage 2 to 3 times full contact in the spring, just like they do in the fall, because the coaches need to see what they've got.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do it 2 to 3 times in the spring behind closed doors, you should just do one of those in front of the fans. That's how I feel about it.
Well, the last few years, Michael, we've heard this is a pivotal year or turning point year for the Jim Harbaugh era. And again, before each season, we've heard that. It's year 5. Most of the big games are at home. There are still plenty of tough ones on the road. In your opinion, how big is this season of Michigan football for Jim Harbaugh?
Well, I keep on saying this. I think at some point you're losing more and more fans every year. At least you're losing fans that are in your corner. If you don't beat Ohio State, you don't win a Big Ten title. And coming off of year 3 where they had some major issues at quarterback and they were reloading, the rebuilding. Not a lot of people were, in hindsight, were as ticked off about 2017 as they thought they were. But then 2018, year 4, you had this 5-star quarterback. You had one of the top 5 defenses in college football. You had some emerging breakout standouts at wide receiver. You had a senior running back. You had a very good offensive line. When you went out there and got punked by Ohio State, and really I don't even care about the bowl game, but getting punked by Ohio State, missing out on a chance to beat them, missing out a chance to win the Big Ten East, missing out a chance to win a Big Ten title. From at least from my audience that calls into the show, that follows me on Twitter, people that I think people are becoming disgruntled. I think there's a growing segment of the fan base that is no longer 100% in Jim's corner. Now, that doesn't mean that they're out. That doesn't mean that they're looking for him to get fired. But if in 2000, the start of the 2015 season, start of the 2016 season, even the start of the 2017 season, I would say 100% of the fan base was all with Jim. That changed a little bit throughout the 2017 season. But now after this 2018 season and losing to Ohio State again, you're nowhere near 100%. You might be at like 75%. And if you were to go out there and lose again to Ohio State at home and lose again a Big Ten opportunity, I think you're going to see a lot of people that start questioning just what this program is and whether or not Jim Harbaugh is ever going to lead them to the promised land. I don't think anybody will be coming forward and going, well, it's time to get rid of this guy. But I do think you're going to have a lot of people say, it's just not what we thought we were getting.
My guest today discussing the status of Michigan football and what we looked like on Saturday is Inside the Huddle on WTKA host Michael Spath. Michael, always a pleasure to have you on the show. And I know our listeners love to listen to Inside the Huddle, so keep up the good work. And the next time we talk to you, we'll probably be talking about game week. So we look forward to that visit.
I can't wait for that. Thanks so much, Mike.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, the number 21 ranked University of Michigan softball team closed out its weekend series against rival Ohio State with a doubleheader split, earning a 6-2 decision before dropping a 2-1 heartbreaker in 8 innings on Saturday afternoon at Buckeye Field. The loss, U of M's first in Big Ten Conference play, also snapped its 17-game winning streak. Head coach Carol Hutchins earned her 1,600th career win with the Wolverines' decision in the first half of that twin bill. This week, Michigan State will be here on Wednesday for just a single game. Then it's 3 on the road at Illinois this weekend. We are 29-11 overall, 11-1 in Big Ten play. Baseball lost 2 of 3 last weekend down in Columbus. We have 4 at home this week. Wednesday, a single game with Bowling Green, and then Northwestern comes in for a 3-game set this weekend. We start the week with a 24-11 record overall, 5-3 in Big Ten action. Don't forget our free show app is available in the Google Play and iTunes stores. You can also hear us on iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, and Stitcher. If you get the show from iTunes, please take just a minute to rate or comment on the show, and we thank you in advance for doing that. Next week, we wrap up the month of April and weekly programming for now. It's time to take a break and, sort of slow down and enjoy some summer and some nice weather. As most of you know, from May to August, we are on twice a month as we again recharge our batteries and get ready for another very busy football season, which is going to be here soon enough. And this is pretty much the way we've done it for the 10 years that we have been programming or on the air for you. We slow it down in May, June, and July. Next week, I hope to have Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports back so we can get updated on the recruiting scene and get his thoughts on the spring game, Josh Gaddis, and much more. That will do it for now, though. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a very blessed and happy Easter, everyone. Until next time, take care, and as always, go Blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!